This is another little piece of data that I want to make sure you remember. This is new, and this is from the California Institute of Technology researchers. They've discovered tiny magnet particles in the brains of humans. They'd never found these things before. This is the first new thing I think they said they've actually found in the body in 300 years, I think it is. It's somewhere in this whole article. And then since this article here, they have found this magnetic sheet that goes around the brain, which I talked about before. It's important to understand this for when I'm talking about the shifting of the poles later of how our brains can be erased. See, the way that we store information is based on that same pattern. Memories of the human brain is based on that same pattern that we were describing just a little while ago. And it's magnetic in nature. And I just want you to see this one here. So you can see how this pattern is harmonic to the flower of life. You can see the flower of life, which is in pencil underneath there. Look at the way that it moves through it. And this is Metatron's cube moving through it. The star tetrahedron inscribed in the sphere. And I don't usually talk too much about Melchizedek consciousness, but one thing I do know from Melchizedek consciousness is that when Metatron created this particular waveform universe, he went into the great void and picked a spot and called it center, and put the first little cubical pattern of energy there and spread it out, and the grid went out from there, which is now everywhere, and the grid moves through the same kind of fields of this. In other words, it goes down in size and up in size forever. It's an infinite pattern in all directions. And the grid is everywhere. It's the one thing that is not moving. It's the only thing that is not moving, meaning that relative to movement, everything appears to be moving through it. And it's everywhere. It's in this room. There is nowhere where it is not. There's even areas where there's no life and nothing, but the grid's there. So one thing's always there. It stretches everywhere. And that grid moves right through this computer. And so it's my belief, even though we were working on this, that if this computer did become self-aware, and it was based on the functioning of this grid, it would be able to tune to the consciousness grid that moves everywhere, that moves through here, and wouldn't need this. It would have access to all information anyway. But so do we have the same grid around us. That's it over there. That's the part of it anyway. And we can, in the same way as resonance, tune right into it and not only connect into the grid that's around the Earth that holds the primary experiences of life here, we can tune into the whole thing. It's all open to us if we can accept it. And if you were to rotate this on its side like this, these two star tetrahedrons, you might remember that there was another one that we saw like this once before, which were the two tetrahedrons inscribed in a sphere, which were the harmonics of music and light. And so you could take this grid, for example, superimpose it over this one, and many, many, many other ones that are based on this principle, and all of them. The more you get into this, you realize that you can just keep laying them over and layering them over until finally there's just no limit to them. They all fit together in a pattern. It's just really oneness. It's one. It's only one thing behind it all. There's one more thing. You remember these wheels? I finally said I would tell you where they came from. These wheels have 24 spokes around them. The size of the little hub in the middle is very specific. If you measure the diameter, you would find that from center to rim, there's exactly 9 diameters based on the size of the center hub to the outer edge. And I can now show you where they came out of the Flower of Life. Now that you know about the grids and the Flower of Life and all this stuff, just down to this level here, you notice in here there are these interconnected spheres. And there is a circle that will fit perfectly around them, which is the circle that you saw on the wall. And if you count the number of spheres that are on there, you'll see there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24. And by putting your radial lines through them, through the centers, and connecting them together down to the next grid down size, this one. Remember, we're going halfway in and creating this grid size. Counting your diameters from there out to the edge, you'll see that there is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And you now have, only you have to connect these centers all the way into that little one, you now have the exact image of those wheels, which is just showing that whoever made those wheels must have had a tremendous understanding of the Flower of Life, because it takes a long time to get to that place there to understand where they're at. And also remember that this image was related to the harmonics of sound and light. And when we saw from the very, very beginning of this thing that sound and light was related to the dimensional levels. And here, what they're referring to is the passage from one dimensional level to another, separated by 90 degrees, which is what each one is separated. These wheels are like maps. You see how this spoke does not line up with this one? You can see that. These line up perfectly up here, but this one are off. In other words, the wheels are not perfectly aligned. They're all rotated at slightly different patterns. And if you could decipher that, the harmonics of that, I believe that you would find that they're telling you exactly where they went. By the harmonics, telling you exactly which dimensional level that they're going to. But even if that was never proved, that's a theory, I don't know that. But judging by what they're talking about and knowing what those wheels are, that's probably what they're talking about. But either way, no matter how it is, it's proof that they had a very deep understanding of this kind of geometry. These are always on ceilings. They're up, and that's the other thing, is they're always surrounded by the stars. They're referring to the heavens. This one here is what I consider, from my own little place, to be one of the most important ones of the drawings that was given to me. Another thing I promised you is I said that at the very first motion of the Spirit of God, He created the Vesica Pisces and immediately said, "Let there be light." Well, now I can talk about that. Do you see where there's a blue circle right here? Does everybody see that one?
Yeah.
Now, do you see this yellow circle? Just barely? In the middle, that's a Vesica Pisces, between the blue circle and the yellow circle. See the Vesica Pisces in the middle? So what you've got is you've got this image hidden inside of here. So this whole grid section is an image of the grid that's hidden behind the Vesica Pisces. And notice inside the Vesica Pisces that you had this two red equilateral triangles, which fit perfectly inside the Vesica Pisces. Okay, everybody see it? And then turning that whole thing and expanding out at 90 degrees, the line that runs down the middle of the Vesica Piscis becomes the edge of a larger triangle over here. Do you see it?
Uh-huh.
Like that? Which is inside a bigger Vesica Piscis.
Right.
And then the line running down that Vesica Piscis becomes a bigger one, going clean off the page, which would be a Vesica Piscis that would just hold this whole sphere. If you were coming in the other way, the shorter line, the line this way, would come up to the edge of this circle and form there's another Vesica Piscis that would fit just inside that circle and form another triangle going this way. And then there would be another Vesica Piscis facing up, going this way. Then there would be another little one going in here. It'll go in and out forever. It's another one of those geometric progressions that has no beginning and no end. Well, first of all, what you're looking at is the geometry behind the eye. Not just the human eye, all eyes. And it was, I believe that was true because at first, from just intuitively, and it doesn't take much intuition on this level because it looks like an eye. It's a round ball with this thing in here that looks like an iris and this whole thing like there. I mean, the human eye is really a big round ball and has this whole, this whole thing in here. Looks like an eyeball. But there was another reason why I ever even came up with the feeling why I thought it was an eye. But one day when I was talking about this, there was a man named Malcolm Lillywhite, who is considered to be the world's foremost authority on light and eyes, who came to my workshop. This man works for the government, and he's really, really brilliant. When he was, what I was told anyway, when he was 23 years old and graduated straight out of college, Martin Marietta gave him $50 million and 200 scientists and said, do anything you want. That's how brilliant he was. And he said, we don't even care what you do, just do something. And one of the things he did is he researched eyes. He was interested in light, and he studied light, and he studied eyes. And when he saw this drawing, he about fell out of his chair, because this was a secret drawing from Martin Marietta that they had arrived at pragmatically by studying all the eyes of everything you can think of, from bees to flies to humans, cats, dogs, blah, 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 everything else like that. And just like crystals are all divided into 6 categories, eyes are all divided into 6 categories. Every eye, no matter what it is out of anything, will fit into one of 6 categories, just like crystals. 6 points of the flower of life. And the end result of all this categorization and everything else I did was that drawing. And I mean, he almost felt like I stole it, couldn't figure out how I'd gotten it. And but in just a moment, you'll see. And one thing I'm really wanting someone to do is to apply that to iridology, because if you take that pattern and put it behind there, now that if you accept that as, you might a little bit more after you see the next one here, but if you accept that as is the structure or the geometry behind eyes, then you can apply that to the physical eye and to the iridology charts and create a much more accurate and scientific relationship behind all of that, because it's such a great way to see what's going on inside of someone without, it's non-invasive, it's nothing, you can just look and see. Anyway, so there are people doing this in Florida now. Coming back to this again, if you're in science and you want to pick up a particular kind of energy, say you want to pick up whatever it is, if you want to measure sound or whatever the thing is, then you need to create a receiver. And an eye is a receiver. But so what you do, the best way is to create the receiver as close to or as possibly close to that which is being sent. And in this case, that which is being sent and that which is the receiver are absolutely identical. The eye and light are the same. No difference. It's the same structure that creates both. And this is what I mean. This is the light wave over here. A light wave is a portion of something called the electromagnetic spectrum. It's electromagnetic, meaning that it's electrical and magnetic simultaneously. It has an electrical field this way, and at 90 degrees it has a magnetic field. The electrical field moves down an axis like this, while at 90 degrees a magnetic field moves down like this. And at the same time, the whole thing rotates by 90 degrees. So it turns. Just take that thing and start turning it. Only it clicks at 90-degree patterns. And that's exactly what's happening here. The electrical field is in proportion to this golden mean line as the magnetic field is in proportion to this one. So the electrical magnetic fields are actually the axis of a vesica Piscis. And they're coming down this line, and the whole thing is clicking out like this. You see how those things are moving at 90 degrees or going in, depending on which direction you want to see it going away from you. Coming, either focusing or coming back out like this, either coming at you or away from you. And they're just doing this little pattern. And so light, the actual electromagnetic, and that's not just light, that's everything. That's the whole electromagnetic field is doing that. And the eye are just simply very similar. No, what is another receptor of light? But leaves, right? Leaves receive light and convert it. And look at this pattern up here, one of the most primitive of all leaf patterns. Look at that pattern and look how close it is. In fact, it's identical to the vesica Piscis thing that's going on inside there. Can you see the relationship? It's just simply duplicating the light. It's matching the light pattern. This is how we were able to make a device so sensitive that we could pick a light field up at 90,000 miles away, is that we created a horn that was in this geometry, where we had a golden mean rectangle this way and another one facing this way that captured the light. And then it went into a golden mean chamber where the light is focused in 4 of the Fibonacci places. We picked one and put a gold cross up there in the shape and in the proportions of a golden mean ratio. In other words, this is 1, it's 0.618. Stuck it in there, and it went through underneath there through a gold crystal which coherentized it, and then into a circuit board that nobody knows anything about. I can't talk about it. It's based on the human spine. And but it was primarily the shape of the horn that was able to the physical shape of the instrument that was able to catch it. Another really good one, though, we decided that would be almost as good, is certain seashells. Be another way to do it using the logarithmic spiral. They're great receptors. They're perfect. And so anyway, begin to see the nature. Now, this next one, you were looking at Dan Winter's work over here. This is, and I started to talk to you about this before. I'll finally get to answer your question over. One day when Dan Winter was out there, I think it was the second time that we were hanging out together, he said he had just finished all this level of work with the thing with emotions and with shape and all of this kind of thing. And he had gone beyond just coming with the shape of it. He had figured out the sacred geometry pattern that was behind the whole thing. And he wanted to share that with me. In the meantime, I had just been completing this thing with light. And so I explained all this to him, and he goes, yeah, okay. And then he showed me the whole thing about emotions. And I go, yeah. And then we were both real quiet for a moment, because this was the pattern that he had for the emotions, which is the same one. It's the same, only he only had just the logarithmic spirals coming out like this. You see? But look what's inside of here. They're just Vesica Pisces. It's the same hidden pattern underneath it. And at that moment, we realized that the motions are directly connected to light. It's the same pattern. So the emotions and light and eyes, and also thoughts, which we haven't got into, the memory patterns and everything else are also tied into there. It's all the same thing. It's all come from the same structural patterns. And it's pretty exciting. I mean, Dan's really, I mean, I'm only interested in just getting your brains to kind of go, oh, like this, so this thing will go back and forth, and you'll start to see, so that you'll see the unity of life, and you'll be interested enough into doing the meditation, because I only really want you to do the meditation. Dan is really interested in actually he wants to do it. He wants to go all the way and tie the whole thing together on every single level imaginable. And it's great. I have no problem with that at all. I want him to do that. But I'm not really interested in going to that level. I'm only interested in taking someone far enough where they can clearly see that there is only one God, and that they'll proceed further from there. This is the thing with Manfred Klein's work, working totally separately from Dan Winter, and found that emotions have shape that you can see and you can reproduce, and basically came up with the shapes behind them and everything. I don't think Manfred Klein, at least while he had written this thing, had come to the level where Dan Winter had arrived at, because he had found the basic pattern even behind the shapes. But it's just to show you that other people are also thinking along those same kind of lines. Remember this? This thing was, to be or not to be? Look at this. If you take a piano and you take the white keys and call them female, and you take the black keys and call them male, look what happens on a piano. Wait a minute. This is just laid right across here. Here's C, female, C sharp, male, D, female, D sharp, male, E, female, and there's no E sharp. It goes straight to here, and you have another female. It fits perfectly onto the organic structure of the beats. And then not only that's got 13 notes in it, and you take the white keys out, and you got 8, and you take the black keys out, and you got 5, and you see the Fibonacci series reversing itself. And you begin to see this exact key and connection between the harmonics of music and organic structure. That there's a relationship between organic structure and music. And it's even deeper than that. This is the human spine. Superficially, if you look at the human spine, there are 24 vertebrae. And the balance points, there are 3 primary balance points in the vertebrae: the lower balance, the middle, and the upper balance. And the lower balance is located in between the first 8 shock vertebrae. This is in between the next 8 vertebrae, and this is in the middle of the next 8 vertebrae. All these are octaves. And this one, the middle one, is in between 2 12s or 2 chromatic ones. But that's a real kind of a superficial way. The Rosicrucians really tied it down. They found that if you take the vertebrae and you weigh them, you weigh each vertebrae, that the differences between the weights of each vertebrae correspond exactly between the cycles per second in the harmonics of music. Again, showing you that the harmonics of sound and organic structure are interrelated. Now this indicates that whatever the sacred form is in organic structure must also be the same one in harmonics of music. And when we get to it, you'll see that this is the organic key to organic structure, and it's also the key to the harmonics of music. It's at least in terms of the octave. Other people have tied that down not only to sound, but to light and zodiacal structures or constellations. Who? Theo Gimbel. Okay, good. What's the name of the book?
I believe it's
Healing Through Color, through Theo Gimbel. He has also come up with this idea of sound and music, but I don't know if he came up with it as precisely as the Rosicrucians did or not. I kind of doubt it. The Rosicrucians are real. They really go for it, usually. Could we put the waveform tape on now? This tape that we're about to play is with Tom Kenyon's work, with Acoustic Brain Research. This is only one thing that he does, and he does a lot of other things. And he gives workshops, and he's doing some real good work. This is actually one of his older things. It's called the Circle of Fifths. Circle of Fifths means like this is C, and you go C, D, E, F, G, and so the next one's G. And if you keep going, each one is separated by, each chord is separated by 5 notes. And then inside here is another circle of fifths that's separated by thirds. This is A, B, C over here, E, F, G. And so you got actually 2 circle of fifths rotating, separated by thirds. And the thing about this, when you hear this, a couple things. If you notice, they're not tied. There's a place where the music will go around, and when it gets into this area, you'll hear it kind of flutter, and then it'll take off again. Because these circular notes of both sound and light and all the aspects of electromagnetic fields, no matter what they are, do not overlap into perfect circles. Instead, they are parts of a spring. In other words, like the colors of red, orange, yellow, blue, green, purple, by the time you get red is a long wavelength, and by the time you get to purple it's a short one, and purple doesn't come back again to red, it goes into infraviolet, it goes into another one. And so it's really a spring, and sound is similar. So let's just hear it. The other thing about it is that this tends to affect your heart like crazy. It tends to open your heart up. And if you put earphones on when you're hearing this, it has its greatest effect. So let's just listen to it for a few. Okay. Okay, close your eyes. Turn it up pretty loud. just sort of drift away on that one for a long time. But if you do that with earphones and stay in it for about 20 minutes, pretty soon you just get real soft. and it's very, there's a lot of science behind this simple thing. He has a lot more, far more interesting and high-impact work with sound inside of your head, where he puts the sound inside rather and moves it around in certain areas in your brain. But this is Alex Gray's drawing. You might recognize it for some of you. I just wanted to quickly show you the electromagnetic spectrum. Some people have never really thought about it before, but it is the whole spectrum just about of what we live in. It's the primary field of energy that we exist in. And the only difference between this whole field is simply wavelength. How long or short the wavelength completely changes the nature of the same energy. It's the same stuff. And all of this is the same one based on that one image, that one sacred geometry image based upon the Vesica Pisces, which is light. Just to show you, the longest wavelengths known are the human brain. And they're 10 to the 10th meter long. So they're almost straight lines coming out of the head. They're really, really, really long ones. And they run all the way down to 10 to the 8th, and then around 10 to the 7th meters you get power lines. These big, huge power lines. This is why power lines are so heavy duty, because their wavelength and human brain wavelengths are almost the same. And then you have voice frequencies, like what I'm talking to you right now, at about 10 to the 6th meters. Going down about 10 to the 5th meters, you have audio and telephone and these kinds of things that move on long electric wires. And then you have your radio and television in here, your 10 to the 4th meters, which are low frequency, medium frequency, high frequency, and very high frequency, and ultra high frequency. In there, going from 10 to the 4th meters all the way down to 10 meters. Actually, down to 1 meter even. And then you start, those radio and television waves start turning into microwaves, super high frequency and extremely high frequency, sub-millimeter waves, going from 10 to the -1 down to 10 to the -3. And then the microwaves turns into infrared or heat. And then, your heat is just infrared heat. And then, so first you have the far infrared, and then you have the moving into the near infrared, and then the infrared turns into the color red. Red, orange, yellow, green, blue, purple. Turns into ultraviolet. And then you have your ultraviolet lights going from A, B, and C, going from 10 to the -7 all the way down to 10 to the -8 meters, which slowly turns into your, and this is there is not immediate lines like that. This is a spectrum, kind of. It turns into your soft X-rays, which don't really penetrate very well, and then finally gets into hard X-rays, which will go right through things, and which get smaller, 10 to the -11th, and then around 10 to the -12th, they get into your gamma rays and nuclear rays, all the way down to 10 to the -15th, and then from there all the way to 10 to the -18th, you have your cosmic rays. And all of these things are just, the only difference is just your wavelength, and they're all based on the same geometrical principles. And it's the same thing. Each one is a loop. Whether you're talking about brain waves or microwaves, they're all a loop, and they're all just continuing around, connect one thing becoming the next thing.
I'm having difficulty with understanding some of the definitions that I'm not getting the definitions.
Okay. How can I help?
Like the levels of consciousness. These are not clearly delineated in relationship to the kinds of things that I already know.
way. Well, these grids that we're talking about, they're kind of like this. They're energy lines and fields. They extend in the Earth and around the Earth, and they are the geometries that hold the structure. It's like the grids that create the grid lines that the atoms just automatically move into to form the crystal. There are these grids that move through this one that form that pattern. And then this has this huge field that goes around this. This field probably stretches out to where you are. It's over there. And it's a real field. If you have a sense enough instruments, you can pick it up and see it and feel it. It's a real part of the whole thing. The body, this denseness, is always the little seed, the core that's in the middle. It's this huge big field. And all I'm talking about is that there is different, with each level of consciousness, there are these grids that are associated with it up to a certain level. And I'm not sure, I believe it's about the fifth dimension when we transcend all of that. But as long as we're down here in this denseness aspect of things, we are concerned with bodies or shapes or patterns. And so the Earth, if this was the Earth, it has these, I have to make a bigger Earth. That Earth is too little. I'm just going to draw this hexagonal field. There's these. If this was a cubical field, though I'm not drawing now, it would be that it's like this energy field that has the Earth inside of it. I wish we could look at Richard Hoagland's work, and you'd have a much better understanding, especially with what science has found. These are real things. They're not just in somebody's minds or something. You can test them. The United Nations, everybody is being aware of these now at this point. And in fact, our governments were aware of our energy, our grid field, for this particular consciousness as far back as around 1950. And if you ever, in fact, I know people who've done this. If you lay out the grid pattern of our level of consciousness, which is based on triangles and squares rather than pentagons, which is the Christ consciousness one is based on. If you lay them out over a globe or a flat pattern, just lay out a double pattern of the Earth and lay the grid out over that. Look to see where all the military installations are. Bingo, right on the nodal points of all the grids, or right on the spirals that come off of them. All over the whole thing. They got these military installations out in the middle of nowhere. They're not just out in the middle of nowhere. They're placed here right on the grids. And what we've been having is this internal war between Russia and the United States to try to control the grid. Because whoever controls the grid controls the planet, controls the thinking of the planet. And we're still going into mind control and all of this kind of stuff that's going on. And the grid is the key behind all of this. And they're now aware of the Christ consciousness grid even. Though, and we're talking about the very lowest levels of all of this. It's a much finer level. It's a much higher level grid. It's much harder to detect. But he was showing it right there on the TV. And so I don't know how to explain this. I realize that there's universal mind. I understand that. That there is one spirit that moves through everything. But there are levels of consciousness that move out through there. There are, just as there are in your human body, you've got, you can just look down and you can go into an atom, and from an atom up to the molecular structure, and from there into a single cell, and from there into a tissue, and each one of these are consciousness levels, awareness levels, and from there up to a whole bone structure, or to organs, and to one whole body, and then then you jump from there to two people, to families, to social structures out farther and farther around. All these different levels of consciousness continue on. They keep on going out in space. They keep going and going and going, and they're all... so when you go up in consciousness, eventually you keep joining with larger and larger bodies that extend out. And even if the thing doesn't have bodies, a lot of them don't have any physical structure whatsoever. but you keep joining with these larger interpretations of the reality. Eventually, you come to, I guess, what you would call, some people would call God. Some people would not call that God. It depends. Everybody has a different definition of God, and it's real hard to explain or to agree on that one. But and this is what I see out there. I do know you eventually get to this one place where you do make that there is nowhere else to go. There is an ultimate. There's an ultimate end, as long as you're still confined within this waveform universe, and where you either leave and go beyond it, or you stay within it. And at which point, what usually happens is you start going back down the other way. And there's actually this cycling motion. There's as many going down as there is going up. And so I don't really, to me, I don't have a problem with this. But I wish I could understand where you do have the problem.
It's trying to distinguish what you're saying by first level of consciousness, second level of consciousness, third level of consciousness. I don't think you've gone beyond the second level of consciousness in relationship to...
Well, see, all...
This is what I was...
Okay, the first level is the first time consciousness becomes self-aware. Below that, it's lower dimensional levels, and it's non-human. The first time it becomes self-aware, it has 42 plus 2 chromosomes, and that's the Aboriginals in Australia. They're the only main body.
That's what you mean by the level.
Yes, we all might look human, but when they look out the eyes, they don't see what you see. Not even close. Not even similar to what you see. They see a whole different world. So different that you can't even talk about it. They got a different viewpoint on a totally different interpretation. If you hold a photograph up to an Aboriginal, you look at a photograph of sunset, and you can look in there and see it. They don't see anything there. All they see is just colors on a page. Their mind can't interpret things like that. They have a whole different way. You know, you look at a tree and you see a green tree there and all that stuff, and you think this Aboriginal standing, you're seeing the same thing. He doesn't see that. He sees something totally different. But you say that's a tree, and he says, yep, that's a tree, but you're not looking at the same thing. You're not interpreting the tree in the same way. He's a different kind of human being. And when we get those 2 more chromosomes like that, we are really, really different too, because he doesn't see himself as an individual. He doesn't even know what that means. He sees the outside the same as the inside. He only sees unity. That's all he sees. If you go over and kill a tree, you just killed part of him. But we don't see that. We think that we are separate. So we have a different interpretation of the reality. We think we're inside of here and we can get away with anything. But when we go back to Christ consciousness again, it's another unity one. At least in the initial stages there, where there is no inside and outside, but it's far more expanded than the Aboriginal. The Aboriginal is pretty much earthbound. The Christ consciousness being is not earthbound. It stretches throughout all time and space. The body of Christ is big. It goes everywhere. And the experience of that cannot be, you can't really, I don't see how you could really put it into words. It's beyond words. It's real different. And the one that goes to the next one above that is another disharmonic consciousness like the one that we're in. If you see all 5 if you see all the geometry laid out there, you'll see that there are 5 squares. There's one, and a triangle, and a square, then another diamond, and another square. And it leads into the final phase where we end up being 55-foot beings with an interpretation of the reality that stretches through all the dimensional levels. And exactly what is beyond that, I don't know. I don't know exactly where that leads to. I can't. It's something I don't quite understand yet. Okay.
No.
But we only have 3 of the grids there because we're not ready to deal with those higher levels.
Don, no.
Okay.
Regarding the Aborigines, because they don't have the awareness of what's going on, or they're completely separated from what we know, they are not affected by that grid of mass consciousness. So they are living a happy life, yet they're lacking certain awarenesses that we're gaining now. In other words,
they have a different life, yes. If for some reason the government's decided to, or figured out somehow to stop the middle grid, every person in the world would die, but not the Aboriginals. They just keep right on going.
They're not. Because they're not linked up with it.
So you've got to keep it right.
Okay, they're not linked with it. They're separated from it.
They're separated from it.
But now that we're becoming linked with it, we have an understanding of it, that whole grid that's around the Earth. We can be the effect of it very easily if we don't really watch our own emotions and thought forms. Because what we put out is going into that grid. And that's what the mass consciousness is doing. They're getting caught up in it.
What we put out is going directly into that particular grid, but they're all interlaced. And I don't know what all the connections...
To get above it, though, in order to transcend it, getting into the Merkaba and the breathing and surrounding ourselves in that bubble and that ship, isn't that separating ourselves from the influences of that grid?
What the Merkaba will do, it will slowly separate you from that grid and reconnect you with the other one, with the Christ conscious one. And
right,
so you will slowly get connected with a different grid.
Right, a different grid.
And all of this is really just a transition. I can't tell you how transitional this is. It's a lot of work for something that's just a sort of a little stepping stone, but it's a transition to a place that has no form at all, absolutely none. This next little one, you're going to have fun with this. And in the 3 areas that the Atlanteans went, which was Egypt and Peru, Yucatan, and Tibetan area up in there, there was each one of these religious groups that are now seemingly different have a sect to them, a separate little area that is different than everyone else. And that is this little group that is set aside are cross-eyed. They're like this all the time. I don't know if they were born that way, but they go around all day like this all the time. And they're not cross-eyed at random. This is what we're beginning to understand. They were seeing differently. We look at the surface of things, and they were looking at a space in front of you, or in front of whatever they looked at. They looked at a particular place in front of it. If they were going to look at this thing here, they wouldn't look at that. They would look at a place here in front. And they would see something different than what everyone else would see. And they were also artists. And they did a lot of artwork on the walls that we didn't even understand what the heck it was until more or less recently. This artwork would usually be 2 somewhat symmetrical things that would look kind of like they were turned toward each other. And if you were to look at this artwork that was on, if you were to just go look in the artwork, like a tourist, you'd look at it and you go, what the heck is that, It wouldn't make a lot of sense, and you'd just walk away from it and think it was just one of those weird things they did. But if you were trained and you looked at it, the object would come together in this pattern, pop out into space, 3-dimensional, just as real as 3D as this room is. And I mean where you could put your hand behind it, this kind of thing. It would be a 3-dimensional object in space. that's still valid even today, in 1993. Got it. And it still be valid. You can still do it. But no one, and we just became aware of this because it actually started, as I understand it, with nurses and doctors who were looking at X-ray photos. And they found this technique of looking at X-ray photos in such a way that they could make the X-ray photo three-dimensional. It took by looking at it in this funny way, and then they could see into an X-ray photo 3D and see where things were, even though it was a flat photo. And later this became known as from that they were able to turn it into something called a stereogram. And there's other names for this, but that's kind of the one that stuck. And so there is what I call stereogrammic vision that is possible. It's a different way that human beings can see than they normally see. Holograms. These are holograms. Can you see these things? If I can aim one at one body, like she can see it now. And let's see, like little mirrors. You can see it now. Can you see that? It's just blind. I can blind people. Anyway, I guess you can kind of see. These are ones we made up. If you get them in the light, they're really beautiful. It's Our Lady of Guadalupe. But this is a hologram. When you do look at a hologram, it does do one of the things that we're wanting to do, which is it turns both sides of your brain on simultaneously. You can't see a hologram unless you can flip both sides on at the same time. But there's another way. There's another form of three-dimensional art, the stereogram, which is based on a slightly different principle that will also turn both sides of the brain on. And so this is one of the reasons why I want to do this, is that it gives you the experience of having both sides of your brain on, which is something that we don't get too much. When you're listening to music with words, you've got both sides of your brain on. If you hear someone singing, it's got to be with the rhythm of the music and singing. That does it. But this is unique. The stereogram is unique because there's an area of your brain, it's called Area 39, I think it is. I believe it's 39. It's behind your right eye. Maybe it's 37. I think it's 39, I think. Anyway, it's one of those. And it's back here. It's a little tiny area back there, which is where your imagination takes place. And so you're going to look at something here in a little bit. It looks like this. This looks like nothing, right? It just looks like a bunch of dots on a page. But it isn't. Because there's actually something out here in space. There's some words out here that you can't see right now, but you could imagine them to be there. When your imagination takes over in a certain way, when you learn how to see stereogrammically, your imagination takes over. This Area 39 gets stimulated, and bingo, these words will pop off into space out in front of you, and you'll start seeing stereogrammically. There's another reason. The other thing that happens is the corpus callosum links together somehow, and the pituitary gland gets stimulated, and this chemical that was in you go into theta, is the other thing, very quickly. And this chemical starts being emitted from here very slowly, the same one that was in the king's chamber. And at first it feels, you can't believe the feeling if you haven't felt it before. And then it starts feeling really, really good. If you stay in it a real long time, you don't want to get back out. When I first started experimenting with this, I just didn't want to get out of it. So, and I have to make a little kind of a disclaimer, or no, it's not that word. I don't know what it is. So far, I've never had a class where every single person could do it. if you have a difference in your eyes, where one eye is nearsighted and one eye is farsighted, for example, you may not be able to do this. If you have too much stigmatism in one eye and it's not balanced in the other, there's too much differences between your eyes, you may not be able to do this. What? Yeah, you can do it with glasses and you can do it with contacts. The way you want to learn how to do this is whatever way you read. However you read, if you take your glasses off to read or you put different ones on to read or whatever, be prepared to read for this because you're going to have this up close like you're reading. So there may be some of you in here that won't be able to do this. If you can't do it, it's okay. You didn't flunk. And it's just the way it goes. It's all right. I want to get as many as I can of this if I can, but really, it doesn't mean a thing if you can't get it. There is another reason why I want to get it. There's about 1 out of every 200 or 300 people that this will have a greater meaning to than what I can truly express to you. Because in the priesthood there was only very, very few who were able to understand what this really meant. And they were able to look into a room and see stereogrammically. And they could see something different in the room. So even if I only get 1 out of every 200, 300 or whatever it is, it's worth it. But nevertheless, we'll just do the best we can. So if you don't get it, it's okay. Really, I mean, don't cry or And also, usually I only get about 60% of the room, something like that. What I've also found is about half to 2/3 of the people who don't get it here, when they go home and they're relaxed, because it has a lot to do with being able to relax. It's like meditation. You can't go into a meditation and say, I'm going to meditate. I mean, there's a certain relaxation you got to do, and a lot of times when people are trying to do this, they start getting more and more intense because they're not doing it, and so they start getting tenser and tenser, and that makes it harder. And so a lot of times when you go home and no one's around and you don't have to prove anything to anybody, you can relax and you'll see it. I'm going to give you one of these. It'll be in the booklet that's handed out, so you can take it home with you. And I also have this one that we're going to hand out to you, and then after that one, I'm going to go through the whole thing. This is one that Mackie made up. It's based on a very sophisticated arrangement of colors relative to the human brain. They're not just at a random on there. There's a very special pattern that's on here. And this one, if you can't do this one, then you might be able to do this one. This one's easier. So we'll try the harder one first. And for those of you who can't do this one, we'll try this one. And then I've got, since then, people have been getting more and more excited about this because of its what it's doing with this area of the brain up here, which is your imagination part of the brain. When they did an autopsy on Einstein, and they took this area of his brain out, he had a huge one. And by doing this meditation for about 5 or 10 minutes every day, you're stimulating that area, and you will increase. It's like doing exercises. And it really helps in psychic work and all kinds of these kinds of things. This just looks like a bunch of dots. But what you see is not always what you get. And just to be an example of that, you see all these spirals going in here? Everybody see that? No, you don't. There's no spirals there at all, not any. Not a one. What's there is concentric circles. And I can prove it to you by putting this on this one right here. And I will move very slowly. I won't get off of it. I won't leave it. I won't trick you. I'll come right back. And it comes right back to the same place. It's a circle. Come up one more. And it comes right back to the same place. It's a circle. They're all just concentric circles. It's the background that makes you think that it's spirals. Your eyes just do this thing. Same way up here. You see these little bowed out lines? They kind of go like that. Does everybody see that? They're straight as an arrow. I don't know if I can... How can I do this? You see how that runs right along the edge of the page? You come over here. Straight as an arrow lines. It's the background that makes it look like that. So, this is the one we're now going to look at. Preferably with a somewhat of a sharp point. Or a pen with a point on it. Okay, does everybody have a pen? Okay. You see these two, you want to arrange the page so it's like this, and you see these two dots right here? Arrange the page so the dots are in that position on the page. Don't look at the little one. If you've got the, let me see this just a second. This big one has a backside. Some of them have a backside. Don't look at that. Look at this big one. It's much easier. Okay? And now, you want to get the page at the distance that you would normally read something. So if you read a book like that, then put it out there. However you read, put it approximately where you read. The other thing is try to get it flat. Don't have it curving or bending or anything like that. It'll make it harder. Not that it's impossible, it's just harder. The second thing is put on whatever glasses you use to read or take them off, whatever you try to do. Okay, now the next thing is you got a pencil, okay, or a pen. Everybody have one? Okay. Take the pointed part up like this, and if this was the, you can look at me here like this now. Here's the thing that I've got holding on. You want to put the pen approximately at the phi ratio. You don't want it here. You don't want it down here. Approximately this far away from the page. Okay? And then while you've got it held there, put the point so the point is approximately in the middle between these two dots, only out here. Just the tip of it, so it's lined up approximately even with those two dots. Now, look at the two dots. Look at the page. Don't look at the pencil. And you're going to notice that your eyes, while you're looking at the two dots, you should see two pencils. Does everybody see that? Yes. Does anybody not see the two pencils? Do you know what I mean by... It's okay. Do you not see them? You see them? Okay. You see two pencils, right? Okay, now, take the two pencils... Move your pencil while you're still looking at the page. Move it up, down, left, right, in, out, whatever you need to, so the tip of the two pencils, the point of the pencil, lines up exactly on those two dots. The what? Both points of the pencil line up on both of the two dots. Okay? Now once you get the pencil lined up so those two dots are there, hold your pencil carefully. Don't move it away or anything, because that's the focal point. Now, switch your vision from the paper to the tip of the pencil. In other words, look at the tip of the pencil. Now that you've switched to the tip of the pencil, you should see three dots below you. Does everybody see that? No? Then if you got four, you're not focusing properly. You need to start over again. Get the pencils lined up properly.
Okay, see, so has everybody got the 3 dots? Well, I'm going to go, people that haven't got the 3 dots, I'm going to go on with the rest of the group, and then I'll come back to you and work on it. If you can't get the 3 dots, you're going to have to start over again. Now, for those of you who have 3 dots, just relax. And could we put that music on the, Rick? That waveform tape? For those of you who have the 3 dots, just relax, and you're going to see the letter T coming off the tip of your pencil in space. It's going to come like this. Here's your pencil. You're going to see 3 dots like this, and then in space, right where your pencil is in space, you're going to see the letter T kind of stenciled out. And then if you notice over here, actually I have to look at this real quickly, I don't remember. Oh, okay. It's a H that looks like this. And then you're going to see the word the. Actually, that's not what the T looks like either. It's a capital T. Sorry about that. Gave you the wrong T. You're going to see the word the. And then above it, you're going to see the word in the same kind of print, you're going to see this. Seeing the light. And it's going to be 3D, and it's going to be like a stencil. You're going to see these words come out in space. Now, who sees it so far? Okay, we got a few people here. For those of you who are now seeing this thing, for those of you who are seeing this, stay in it. Just keep staying there and take it like a meditation. And just stay in there and just watch it. And be aware that between your third eye here, you will probably start feeling this tingling sensation. This is, you're now doing something you may not have done for thousands of years. And it's a whole new way of seeing. Your area 39 has been stimulated. It's opening up. Your left and right side of your brains are on once. And if you'll just be real quiet, you'll rapidly go into theta. Your brain will be flipping back and forth into theta. Yeah, you're breathing everything. It's very healthy. Yes, once you got the 3 dots, actually once you, also 2 things, once you see the seeing the light, you can remove the pencil. And once you see the 3 dots, you can also remove the pencil, because you just need to get those 3 dots, because then you're in the proper motion. And then you just got to relax and let your eyes kind of just kind of focus around. See it. Okay. You can make a stereogram. It doesn't have to be dots like this. There's lots of ways. The flower of life is a stereogram. You can just take this and cross your eyes, and you'll see a Vesica Pisces in the middle, and it'll be totally 3-dimensional. And all the things are in there. That are, as long as you have symmetrical aspects that are on either side. And she asked, what does it do to your normal vision? I'll remove. I don't know. I'll tell you, if you ever want to talk to someone about vision and things like that, or what it does to you and stuff like that, there's a man that I recommend. His name is Jacob Liberman. Okay. And he wrote the book called Light and Future Medicine. Light and the Future Medicine. And he's taught a couple times at our school when we had it. And he's got some real good stuff and some really incredible ideas. He used to teach the Olympic team. He could teach, no matter what you do in the Olympics, he could make you about twice as good in about 3 days. And it's Liberman. Liberman. Just for an example, well, he would train you. Remember how you stop your breathing when things happen? He would train you so that you wouldn't stop your breathing. That was the whole key. Was when you started a learning process or anything, you kept your breathing going rhythmically. And if you can do that, you can learn at a much faster rate. And he had this thing, and I watched this with my eyes, and I just couldn't believe it. He put you on a trampoline, a little round trampoline, where you're jumping on this trampoline, and he puts an easel up here like this, and he goes like this, and he puts these arrows He has these rows and rows of arrows that are different colors, and they're all pointing in different directions at random. This is the first exercise. And he has you, so there'll be a whole bunch of them like this on here. The whole thing will be filled with them. And you're on top of this trampoline looking at this thing, and you start jumping. You have to jump so you completely clear the whole thing. And then you have to start moving your hands like this, so that you got to get your physical body going. So you're jumping up and down, and you're moving your hands to the jump, so that every time you come down, your hands are like this. You got a rhythm going. And then he tells you just to say the direction the arrows are going. So every time you come down, you have to respond. You can't wait. So you go up, right, down, left, up, left, up, right, like that. And then he'll say, and after you go through the whole thing, he says, okay, now say which one is up, but on every other one, say the color. So you'd go up, blue, red, green, up, black, up, red, green, like that. You do that one. Then he'd say, okay, now every other one, he'd keep adding to it. Say, okay, now you keep saying the color, the color, but every third one rotated a quarter turn. And say that one. You go, oh, okay. And you do that, and it just comes out. And you're, meanwhile, jumping and doing this whole thing. And then he just keeps making it more and more and more and more complex. And so the complexity is you can't believe it. And the person's remembering his breathing and doing this thing, and it just keeps getting more and more complex. He had one where finally he gets you with this poem. It's Mary Had a Little Lamb, something like this. And he has you doing this thing with this poem where you're saying different words, and you're putting words in here, and you're moving the words around, and you're doing all this stuff. And it's so complex, I don't think that anybody can even remember long enough to even write down what all the stuff was. And I watched this one guy, and this guy was going, I'm doing this. I can't believe I'm doing this. And he did this entire thing, this whole complex thing. And he says, okay, you're doing it. You got it. Now turn around and look the other way and repeat it backwards. He says, don't think, just do it. He says, okay. And he did it. He repeated something that took about 5 minutes of super complex stuff. He repeated it backwards. He just walked off the thing going, can I do that? And he had everybody in the room doing this stuff. It was really amazing. And so the same, just one second, he says that like when you're doing any sports or skiing or anything else like this, a lot of it is, you got to get the mind out of the way so the limitations are gone. You can't, you know, immediately if someone was to just be thrown up here and say, do that, you'd say, well, I can't. If you gave them the whole thing, you'd say, well, I can't do that. And then you can't do that. And but he would just get you so the place that where you just could do it, and you can. And so if you were, when he would train the Olympic teams, he'd get them the eye movements. He's an ophthalmologist and has a PhD in light in some way. He works with Malcolm Lillywhite. And the eye movements are real important, your eyes and how you work with them and your breathing. And he's pretty good. He's really good. And he gives workshops on all of this stuff. Yeah. Those Gurdjieffian movements are really, the sacred dances are really extraordinary. Has anybody ever seen this take place? There's a movie called Meetings with Remarkable Men. Has anybody ever seen that movie? Just a few? I really recommend you try to dig it up. It only came out for a little while, and it was too esoteric for most people, and never made, very much money or anything like that. But the movie's very, very, very good, and you'll see a side of Sufism that's pretty remarkable. It is on video, and you can get it in video stores, but you'd have to go to a big one, because. Yeah. If you notice, for you who knows, that they never showed the Enneagram on there. They showed the wings of the Enneagram, and they secretly put 3 men sitting at the points to complete the Enneagram. And they never any time did they ever actually show the Enneagram on that screen. But they did at this one dance where but again, it was just 3 people that were actually completing the pattern. Yeah, well, the whole thing is a meditation, and it puts you into a state. This is what I would call an open-eyed meditation. It's where you're not going out, but you're being here to make movement. And the next area is that we're going to start looking at. We're going to talk about the chakra systems, and